Hey y'all, Amber here. Alright, before we jump into this, I'm going to preface with a couple of disclaimers. One, I did not write this script. It was written by a very, very close friend of mine who is the one who helped me even develop the character in the first place. So keep that in mind. If the style is different for the writing, that is why. Two, I apologize that the shading for Levi isn't quite up to par with my usual. We've been in the middle of a pretty bad heat wave, and it's like 95 plus for the humidity, and it's getting on my nerves. I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm not sleeping well, like worse than usual. And all of that rigmarole, it's kind of killed my mood a little bit, so I admit the art's not as good as it should be. I'll probably reshade him sometime in the future. However, for now, I've got the art done, so we'll go from there. And with that, now to get into the story of Levi. Levi had an average life starting out. Both his parents worked respectable jobs. His younger sister, by 3 years, showed signs of being an early prodigy, which did mean he lived slightly in her shadow, but he was no slouch either. He wasn't a brilliant kid by any stretch, but his lowest grades were almost always consistently B's, and his parents made sure that he knew they were proud of him. However, when he started to enter puberty, things started to take a downward turn. He stopped being as social as he had once been. He seemed to prefer being by himself more and more, and his grades started to drop, with him consistently staying in the C range. His family then discovered that he was claiming that he was hearing voices around him, almost all the time, and the only time he ever truly wasn't being bothered by them was when he slept. Concerned for his well-being, and a little scared of what he might do if this went untreated, he was taken to a child psychiatrist, who determined that he was suffering from a severe case of schizophrenia. He was prescribed medication, but it quickly became apparent that things were getting worse since they started it. Levi could see that if he didn't do something, he would probably be taken away from his family, or, at the very least, he would cause them massive grief. So he decided he would do the only thing he could do: lie and cover it up. He didn't take any more of his medication, but he told them he was, while aggressively ignoring the voices he heard, and the faces he swore he was starting to see. He poured all of his efforts into his studies, which left no room for socializing. So, as a result, he became known as a weird loner kid with a mental issue. However, even though he sacrificed his social life, he brought his marks back up to where they had been before, which seemed to lessen the burden and worry on his family. He'd also discovered that reading seemed to help him cope with what he was going through, as well as writing about his experiences and the world around him. This caused him to decide that he would try and pursue a career in journalism, whether that be for a newspaper, online column, or whatever else. This led him to take a volunteer position at the school paper, and even though he was the weird kid, his articles and stories were received well by the staff, and were largely met with apathy from the student body. All things considered, though, very positive. This and his grades were enough to land him a place in a university where he chased a major in journalism, with a minor in psychology. However, though he had been good at hiding it in his past, his mental issues seemed to just be getting worse. Halfway through his first year of university, he had started to develop migraines, seemed quite paranoid, was starting to become sleep-deprived, and overall, people were quite nervous around him. The only person that seemed to even try and form any sort of friendship with him was another student named Alyssa. I will have a link to her in the card, because if I recall correctly, I did a video on her as well. She seemed to empathize with him about being disliked and feared, and although he still suffered from whatever it was that was afflicting him, the two became fast friends, and he cherished that. So it was no surprise that he was happy when he and Alyssa were told to do a human interest story for one of their classes. I'll spare the intricate details, as that is a story on her own profile, but suffice to say, the two discovered that visiting an abandoned, condemned, and supposedly haunted mental asylum has risks, both foreseen and completely out of this world. Despite the harrowing experience, the two got out with their own skins still attached, aced the assignment, and their studies continued. Alright, so reading this, obviously I did do her video, and I must have gone into detail with that. So yes, I will have Alyssa linked in the card above and in the description below. However, his own issues were starting to really compound upon him, and Alyssa could do nothing to alleviate him of his stress and issues. That was when a scientist, Dr. Kia Remington, being at the university for a lecture, happened upon him in the middle of one of his quote-unquote episodes. She approached him, and after a moment, offered him what appeared to be a small mint, about the size of a tic-tac. She promised it would help him, so he took it, and much to his surprise, the faces he was seeing, brief flashes of, and the voices he was constantly hearing, faded. They seemed to go away. Not completely and utterly, but it was a massive relief. She told him that that was because he was a mage and had mana, but he was special. Even among those with mana, she revealed to him that he was what was known as a conduit, meaning he could passively communicate with the spirits of those that had passed on. The mints she had given him were actually mana suppressors, and that he could take them until he learned to control his mana. Things were definitely on the up and up now, especially as she told him that he and his friend, Alyssa, might be able to get a job through the organization she worked for, the unit in San Diego. A place that worked in the shadows for the government, protecting the public from unknown and unbelievable threats. They also helped those that were suffering and displaced from the world at large find their place in said world. However, things took a massively horrific turn when, suddenly, he felt himself overcome with an uncontrollable desire to harm Alyssa and those around him. Alyssa's the main one, though, let's be real. He wanted to corrupt her mind, her soul. He wanted to drive her to the insanity that he was starting to feel. But he felt the overwhelming urge to fight back, as he didn't want to hurt her. In the end, those at the unit had to intervene, and it was further discovered that he was even more unique. Conduits are rare. His level is a totally different story. Turns out, he was actually a prodigy of a conduit, and was actually able to contact a race of omnipotent, godlike, chaotic entities, only known as the Ancients, best likened to eldritch gods from H.P. Lovecraft's work. It seemed that when Levi had reached puberty, his passive mana had begun to mature immensely, which painted a target on him for the Ancients, and the voices he was hearing. The faces he was seeing, they were no longer acting as a barrier, preventing their influence from taking him over. When he took the mana blockers, they lost that power to distract and protect him, allowing the Ancients unfiltered access to him. Thankfully, Levi was able to fully recover from the incident, and the unit decided that they would take an active interest in both he and Alyssa's lives. They would help the two get through their schooling, would provide them with jobs in their media relations department, give them the tools and resources they needed to keep their lives steady, and even provided them lodging as well. Now, today, Levi is doing better than ever. Due to his history of mental illness, he has a bit of a distant relationship with his family, but it is far from bad or strained. He writes them every so often, and they write back, contacting him on holidays and such. He and Alyssa work in the media relations department, spinning stories about public incidents in such a way that they are believable, and the two now live together as more than friends. She even gave him a Wiccan pendant to help strengthen the power of the ever-rotating spirit barrier that surrounds him, though he's always worried that the Ancients may finally manage to crack through that barrier and drive him to the insanity that they wish him to have. Well, there we go. That's Levi in a nutshell. Yeah, some of it I had a hard time with because omnipotent is a word that I always trip over. I am so sorry about that. I'm leaving that in just to show that I don't talk well. I don't talk good sometimes. Anyway, a huge thank you to my friend for writing this out. There will be more from him in the future because most of the male characters I devved with him, so he has a better understanding of them. A lot of them were his ideas, etc. We just largely agree that I own the characters for ease, mostly. Keep them all together and the like. Plus, I actually keep up on the characters, he doesn't. Anyway, yeah. This video is a bit shorter. Oh, excuse me. This video is a bit shorter than I usually do, and I was hoping to manage to make it hit 10 minutes, but it doesn't seem like I was able to. However, that's not a huge issue. Next week, as I said, is going to most likely be my Lycan bounty hunter, because she needs a profile. Her daughters, her mother, they all have profiles. She needs one. And she's the last in that group of characters for the moment. I'm not sure who it'll be after that or anything. I just know next week. So, anyway, with that being said, I will leave it here. As usual, if you have any questions about Levi or Alyssa or anybody, any of my characters, please feel free to leave a comment down below asking. I will answer anything I can, which obviously will be most of them. I just might not answer particularly offensive, rude, or what have you comments. Yeah, beyond that, thanks for stopping by, giving this a listen or a watch, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Stay cool, cats. This is Amber, out.